Well, the final episode of CNN's Reliable Source aired yesterday, and outgoing host Brian Stelter opened the final show with what became the focus of the entire hour, paying tribute to the network's longest-running program.
The small but mighty show punched above its weight for so many years. Even a former president commented on the cancellation. Reliable Sources has been a one-of-a-kind show and a popular show. It's a part of journalism school curriculum. Teachers across the country and in other countries outside the U.S., teachers use segments from this show all the time in classrooms, in lessons, guiding and teaching the next generation.
And Reliable Source was on the air for 30 years, Stelter hosting for 9 of those. It sounds like he's going to miss it. I don't know if the viewers are going to miss him. Joining us now with reaction is host of the Trish Regan Show, Trish Regan, and the founder and editor of Fourth Watch Media, Steve Krakauer. Welcome to both of you. All right, so I want to play one more clip of what Stelter ended up saying at the very end of his show before he went off air yesterday. Watch.
I know it's not partisan to stand up for decency and democracy and dialogue. It's not partisan to stand up to demagogues. It's required. It's patriotic. And I believe America needs CNN to be strong. I believe the free world needs CNN to be strong. And it will continue to be, because all of us are going to help make that happen. The free world needs a reliable source.
All right, Steve, I'm going to start with you. You used to work at CNN, actually. He says that America needs CNN. He says he's not partisan. It seems like he's trying to make a case for himself as he's going out the door here, getting canceled.
Yeah, you look at that intro, the first video clip he played, and it just makes so much sense that Donald Trump is in the video screen next to him, because, I mean, the show, really, the network, CNN as a whole, changed in the Trump era. And I would say, I think there's lots of criticisms you could lodge at CNN from the time that I worked there in 2010 to 2013 to, even before that. I think that they're certainly leaned left in certain ways. But the mission of CNN when I was there and before, it was essentially abandoned during the Trump era. And I do think that there is value to having a news network that it may not be the most sexy thing in the world, to have objectivity as your goal. But that is actually a noble goal. The problem is Brian Stelter and the Reliable Sources and CNN as a whole abandoned that quite explicitly during the Trump years, because they felt that they had some higher mission to work towards. And that really, led to audience erosion.
Yeah. The thing is, Trish, CNN CEO, his new CEO, Chris Licht, he replaced Jeff Zucker, who stepped down in February. We covered that. But he told staff that more change is coming. He's been wanting to try to bring the network back to center more. But he said that staff are not going to be happy with some of these decisions. Who should be on the chopping block? Because I think some people were actually surprised by Brian Stelter. They thought there were maybe some other people that made more sense, but it sounds like maybe they shouldn't get comfortable.
Gosh, I mean, it's a good question. I think you could go through the list there. You'd find a lot of people whose biases have been very much on display. Now, in some cases, that's fine. I mean, I make it very clear, right? I've got a certain bias, a bias towards capitalism. May not be perfect, but it's the best we got. And a bias towards sort of a libertarian kind of freedom viewpoint. And I tell everyone, look, I'm a journalist and I'm going to look at things as impartially as I can. However, I come with these biases, and you should know. And I think the problem for CNN was that it was masquerading, if you would, Lindsay, as one thing, pretending they had no bias when the bias was, frankly, really off the charts. And I think the viewers felt it, they sensed it. And that show in particular was one example of it. The other thing I'd say about that show is it really speaks to how bad journalism, so-called journalism, had really become. Only in that it felt very mean-spirited. It tended to report on a lot of gossip. And I think that we all need to be better than that as a society, but certainly CNN as a news network with a show that was looking at journalism at its core.
Yeah, you speak about the bias. I think it's so important, right? To be transparent about it and say, hey, but CNN saying, hey, we are middle of the road, facts first, and then they don't do that. So I think people are happy that Chris Licht is trying to bring it back. But I will say, speaking of left-leaning media outlets, starting today, the New York Times is going to have a beat reporter covering right-wing media. The Times said this about the need to cover the right-wing media. They said it's filled as it is with people who reject mainstream narratives and question the institution that hold up our democracy. Understanding the way information is developed, circulated, and absorbed on the right is vital at this precarious moment and requires a healthy measure of patience. They go on. So this is going to be under the democracy team, Steve. It's like if you reject any of what they would call the mainstream media, then you are against democracy, I guess.
Yeah, I remember the job description. They were trying to fill this job for, I believe, almost 9 months, and they laid it out like this is going to be like hazard pay. I mean, you're going to get the incoming from the Twitter trolls. I mean, it was just so ridiculous. But no, it reads like people that are, it's like an anthropological adventure and not a journalistic enterprise. It's like these people, we don't really understand them. What are they like? They might be, throwing things at us. I mean, there's definitely a level of absurdity to it. I think on one level, it's good that there's some recognition that we're missing something with our coverage, but this seems like not the right avenue to approach this with grace and humility and introspection for how awful the coverage has been over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, Trish, I don't have much time left, but when asked if they were going to have anybody to cover the left-wing media, they couldn't give an answer, only about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And Steve's totally right. I mean, it's really been just horrendous, the kind of coverage we have seen over the last 5 years. And I would just say, look, as businesses, they need to be more thoughtful. This wokeism, this extreme PC stuff, it's ultimately not really going to fly, especially in a more challenged economy. So I think journalist organizations, they need to offer up both sides. If they're going to have the right-wing media correspondent, then do the left-wing too, and try and have some semblance of something in the middle. I think it's really critical, frankly, for our society right now.